Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. And we got a really good show for you guys today. This gentleman that I'm going to introduce here in just a minute, his name is Dave Orton. And I saw Dave as a guest of Nick and Ryan's on a Tribe of Giants, or actually on Waking Up with Giants. And I watched the whole show, and what this man had to share. I mean, I was getting goosebumps really during the show, and that little voice kept whispering in my head, "You've got to see if you can get Dave on the show." And so I reached out to him, and Dave was grateful enough to say absolutely when and where, and we'll make it happen. So before I introduce Dave, I'd like to share a little bit about who Dave is. He's been in coaching business. He actually coaches individuals and couples. He's been doing it for 10 years. He is a master of acknowledgement, which means he sees collectives. Oh gosh, am I doing this right, Dave? And the greatness in others.
There
His
we go.
training includes going through programs from Dale Carnegie, Toastmasters, Tony Robbins, Landmark Worldwide, and NLP training through empowerment. And NLP training is really, really cool. I've done a couple classes myself. It's some really great stuff. Dave has also invested in the best coaches on earth, including the ultimate coach, Steve Hardison. You guys have heard us say Steve Hardison's name on the show a couple times, and we also interviewed his nephew, which was really flipping cool. Also, Townsend Wardlaw, Rich Habits, Steve Chandler. Steve Chandler has been a guest on The Other Side of Addiction. We've got Joe DiGano, Parker Winder, Landmark Forum leaders, and many others. He was an introduction leader with the Landmark Worldwide for 7 years. In addition to coaching, he has over 20 years of experience in high-tech leadership, where he led teams up to 105 people in countries around the world. Dave loves people and learning about and talking with individuals from other cultures, religions, nations, and background. He loves to travel and has been in 16 nations around the globe. He enjoys rewriting and recording songs in the style of Weird Al Yankovic. Of course, that's not on there, but I know who you're talking about. Making social media videos, watching old movies, and making up and fulfilling challenges. Dave recently completed a 30-day cold plunge challenge, which we definitely got to talk about that because I've really been thinking about doing that. So he grew up in Rexburg, Idaho. After an accident and a near-death experience at age 14, Dave recovered his health and has since completed a marathon, a half marathon, and 2 Olympic-length triathlons. Dave and his sweetheart Penny have been married for 25 years, and they live in Boise area for 20 years and have 4 children. 4 children. Dave, my gosh, buddy, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to be on the show. I'm honored and I'm blessed that you're here with us.
Thank you, Al. It's such a pleasure to be here. And just to be with someone whose stand in life is for the health, well-being, and prosperity of people. You know, the other side of addiction is aliveness, connection, well-being, and until we cross over there, and for me, I know for sure, until we cross over, then it's simply not available, right? So
Right.
thank you for who you are as well. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Ryan the Lion Morris is a very emotional human being, and I'm just like Ryan. So you were already starting to bring tears to my eyes for those kind words because, again, it is such a huge passion of mine as well as my wife's.
Mhm.
And, we say many times, if we can make a change and a difference in one person's life, everything that we've gone through was worth it because
Mhm.
we know that one life will change another life and it'll just continue to snowball.
Mhm.
So, my gosh, man, what got you into coaching? I mean, what got you to be in the area that you're at? Because a lot of times, right, it took my wife's addiction, my past addiction, all the trauma and bull crap we went through in our lives. How we are still married is beyond me, to be honest with you. That's what put us on this path that we're on right now. What got you on yours?
Hmm. That's a beautiful question. I've never really considered it from that exactly that perspective. The the path that I took was one where I grew up in a very kind of, I'm not sure how to say this. I grew up in a culture where I thought that we had the answers and we were the only ones that had the answers. And not only that, but only the Ortons really had the answers. Only my family really, and all the other
Are
folks
you
I come
sure of
from.
that? Because I think the Richards thought the same exact thing.
Well, it's such a beautiful, it's an interesting thing in the culture in which I'm presuming you grew up as well, but the one that I definitely grew up in, that there's an unconscious exclusion of anybody that doesn't see things exactly the same we do, exactly the same way we do. Not sure what I said there.
Yeah, it was all good.
Oh, good, thank you. The problem I ran into was I was quite awkward as a child. Like at age 5, I knew I loved to be in front of people. I loved attention. I loved to be with people. So it's both, I love to be with people and I love to talk with people and I love to be on the stage almost, if you will. But I was so awkward that it was very difficult for me to connect with people. My mom gave me a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I
Uh-oh.
was a voracious reader. Like read
Are you there, Dave?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we froze up twice there. So I just heard that you were a reader and then it froze up.
Okay. Hmm. All right. Well, let me know if it freezes up again. Here we go.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, voracious reader. So I read that book like 20 times and tried really hard to implement it. And the most important thing I got from that was to be interested in other people. And the unexpected consequences of that were that I got to be, in order to have interest in people, legitimate interest, I have to give a crap about them.
Yeah, right.
So I fell in love with people and I fell in love with self-development. The next book I got was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. My dad gave me that one when I was like 14 or 13. And I really enjoyed that one a lot. Read that a bunch of times all the way through when I went and served a mission and things like that. I did have some fears growing up that were fear of Soviet Russia, fear of nuclear war. Those two were intertwined. Fear of lightning, and those were the big fears that I had. And fear of war. And overcame the fear of thunder and lightning when my dad took me and my brothers out and we just went puddle jumping in the middle of a magnificent thunderstorm. And I saw how much beauty there is to be seen when you're out risking being electrocuted. You get, highly unlikely with trees, all around for, different places, but just to how beautiful it is instead of hunkering down in my house and hoping that it goes away. And then when I was 14, I got hit by a truck in a farming accident and had a near-death experience, but also was out of commission they call it a semi-conscious state. It wasn't a coma. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but I wasn't there for 5 days. I have no memory of 5 days. And those are the 5 days that Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait back in 1990. And so CNN was on in my room and I saw tanks and all these things. And I realized in that moment when I woke up how utterly outside of my control that was. And that my worrying about that was doing absolutely no good to anyone. If my worrying about war would stop war, I would worry about war, but it doesn't.
Right.
And then God has the ultimate sense of humor because when I went on my mission, I got called to Russia. So I went from having I used to call people communists as an insult, right? And God looked down and said, "You, my boy, are going to go learn how to love some communists."
He works in mysterious ways.
He does, and I did. and it was rough. I mean, I had a stomach ache. I got robbed the first night that I was in Russia on the train ride down to
Oh,
the mission
geez.
home. And so I showed up with no money and had to mooch off of my companion for the next month until we got our influx of cash, if you will. And it was yeah, I had stomach problems, like ulcer almost is what it felt like for the first 3 months, just trying to get into this new place. Because the longest time I'd ever been away from home was the 2 weeks I was in the hospital after I got hit by the truck. you know so and aside from that, it was like scout camp, so it was I think it was mostly homesickness, but it was really an interesting experience. The coaching, I realized I was a natural leader in scouts. Like when they called me as the patrol leader, at age 12,
Yeah.
and I found out that I could relate to people and I could play whatever role needed to be played. Like I could bark orders if we were in the middle of a competition, or I could be really gentle and kind and talk with people and help them through their issues. So leadership became something that was, so I was a leader there. I was a leader in school. I was a leader in different clubs that I was in. And that was fulfilling to me. And for me, as I've grown up, I've continued to, invest in self-development all my whole life. In 2009, I had been investing with one of the people that was on the movie The Secret for a couple of years, and then he went through a phase where what happened was he had an event and 3 people died at his event, and he went to prison for a couple of years. And I was like, okay, hold on, this isn't really what I want to
Wow.
do. But so 2 years later, a friend of mine directed me to TBOL ITNFL, the Steve Hardison's video that he made at
Yeah.
University of Utah about Deuce Latouille, and that woke something up in me. I was so moved that I immediately emailed Steve with like the dumbest email I've ever written in my life. Hey, I've been working on myself for 20 years. Any recommendations? And I was like, I don't know what to write. I don't think it matters. I just need to communicate with this guy. And
Right.
I hit send, and he immediately emailed me back and said, hey, call me at this number. And we talked for a couple of hours. And this is so funny. At that point in my life, because he spoke at University of Utah, the apostate university in my mind,
Yeah. Right.
what I do, I was like, this guy
Uh,
can't be, LDS, and it turns out he was. But and then 2 years later, I went and actually sat with him, and he lovingly told me that I was the most pretentious son of a bitch he'd ever seen in his life. And I had never been told that without it coming across as an attack. And I was shocked, because I had dressed up in my Sunday best and come with my shoes polished, ready to cry at the drop of a hat to be inspired by this guy.
yeah.
And totally disarmed me. And at the same time, I was like, I've never been hugged with those words before. I've never been loved through that kind of language before. And in those hours, I experienced what coaching was. And I was like, that is amazing.
Right.
And the last thing he said to me was, get yourself into the landmark forum as quickly as you can. So I used to come down to Salt Lake almost every week for about 7 years to participate with landmark education down there. Yeah, so that's what and I started coaching as a hobby right about that at that point in 2013. And I did coaching part-time, augmented my income with coaching. I even coached during when I lost my job, 15-year tech job, and went into deep depression. I kept coaching as I was in the middle of my own dark night of the soul. It was sure how that worked, but I'm very grateful for it.
Wow. Yeah. I was going to ask how the heck that worked. I mean, excuse my language, but it seemed a little bass backwards.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah, it does.
Wow.
Really does. And that was like the only thing I could get myself to do, really, was to show up for my clients And in those, actually, I only had one client at that point, one business client. And it was so funny because during that time, they went from 3 million a year to 12 million a year. While I was having the hardest time of my life, they were thriving. And that may have actually been where I really fell in love with coaching, because I recognized that I can make a difference with people in a meaningful way, and I didn't have to have all my stuff together to do it. And that's been really quite a remarkable thing for me, to recognize that I can have failures and failings and still lose my shit from time to time and cuss up a storm. And so long as I tell the truth about where I'm not being,
Yeah.
not being or not doing what one would think a boy from Rexburg would be doing, I still have power, and enormous power. The power is actually in telling the truth about where I'm an asshole. Who knew? You know?
Yeah.
So when I'm talking in church and I share about how I swear a lot, and how I was in a line yesterday and I dropped an F-bomb, and then I realized there were kids around, I'm like, oh, great. I saw people nodding. When I'm teaching in church and I'm sharing about my addictions and my experience with those, I see people being surprised that I'm willing to talk about that, but also recognizing that this is a real conversation. This is not window dressing church. This is the real stuff.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm glad that you brought that up, Dave, because I had this gal, beautiful young lady, who was our guest co-host on our show. Her name's Janessa, and both her and her husband are LDS,
mhm,
and her husband battled sex and porn addiction for a long time.
mhm,
And one day her bishop asked her to do a talk in Sacrament. And she's like, well, what do you want me to talk about? And he says, well, pray about it. You'll get your answer. So she got her answer. Well, she got up and she started talking about her husband's sex and porn addiction. And I'm like, oh my gosh, girl, you've got some cojones, right? I mean, I cannot believe you did this. And
mhm.
she goes, Al, it was the craziest thing. She goes, there were ladies who would always come up and talk to me after church, that when church was done, they wouldn't even look at me. While others started coming up to me, people who had never talked to me before. And our thing here on the show, and a lot of our guests, and probably just yourself included here, from what I'm gathering, that's what our voices are for, right? Is to tell the truth and talk about it, because it's not going to go anywhere. And people, I really do believe, and it's not all people, but I really do believe that there are some people out there that just believe, if I don't see it, if I don't hear it, and if I don't talk about it, it's going to go away. It's not. It's there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's another part of that, which is, that Steve Hardison was talking to when I first met him, the inauthenticity of that, meaning not that a person is bad or wrong, but simply that they're not dealing with reality. They're dealing with a story that they have about reality. And that can be very detrimental to a person. I have a lot of friends, a lot of people that I coach, that they grew up in a gospel of shame. They didn't grow up in the same, we grew up going to the same church, getting the same lessons, but their parents taught them that the way the way that they, who God was a jealous and angry God that was out to punish them if they stepped out of line. And they drag them into the bishop's office when they did something wrong, and yeah, gospel of shame. So it's difficult to have, if that's your reference for spirituality, that's your reference for religion, no wonder it's not life affirming, not life giving, not building you up. And there are a lot of people that deal with that. And I have enormous compassion for them. I know that my experience was not always. My parents are amazing, and they did the very best they could.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I interpreted things growing up was that very much in alignment with the gospel of shame. When I got hit at age 14, it was an interesting near-death experience. I've read a lot about near-death experiences because I was like, I've had one. Let's see what everybody else's experience was.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to see the tunnel. I wasn't allowed to see what was on the other side. I got stuck in the waiting room where I got to feel this overwhelming joy and love that is beyond the capability of language to describe. But I know that at that point in my life, if I had seen that white light and been able to see, the other side, I would never have come back to this place. Are you kidding me? But I did get this feeling, I got a taste, a beautiful experience of unconditional love. And that was before I experienced addiction. It was before I experienced a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I got to know the possibility of this thing that is kind of like my credo right now, which is there's nothing I could do or that you could do that would make you unworthy of the love of God or the love of the divine or the love of the universe or the love of of everything that is, whatever term works for you. I am unattached to what works for you. And there's nothing I could do that would make me unworthy of loving me.
Wow.
And there's nothing you could do that would make you unworthy of me loving you.
That's huge. I mean, I was getting goosebumps when you were saying that. And I have found pretty much 98%, if not 99%, heck, it could even be 100% of all the people that I've interviewed on this show, which has been over 160 people from all over the UK, Canada, the United States. Those that have battled addiction, no matter what kind of addiction it was, whether it was gambling or drugs or alcohol or sex or porn or gaming, whatever it may be, that love for themselves wasn't there, right? It was gone. And if we cannot love ourselves, how can we expect, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, please correct me, because I don't mind getting constructive criticism at all, because that's how I learn as well, right? How can we love and care for others when we can't even do that for ourselves? I mean, we have to love ourselves, and it's not selfish. I don't think it's selfish. For a long time, I thought it was. I thought it was very selfish to put me as number one. I mean, I'm not. God is number one. That's for me. That's who it is in my life. And then it comes my family, and so on down the line. But however, I have found so much more love in individuals because of the way I have found who I am as an individual inside. My wife and I, we've been together almost 18 years, been married 15 this month. And she's even told me, you are not the same guy that I married, not even close.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, I hope it's gone forward and not backwards. and luckily it has, right? It has gone forward.
Mm-hmm.
And it was me losing my job of 24 years, which we were talking about before the show, that put me on that path.
Mm-hmm.
And it's helped me in so many different ways. And the first couple books that you mentioned, I've read both of those.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing books, very, very good books, but it starts opening your eyes.
Yeah. Oh man, I love it. So my addiction, I've had a couple of pretty serious addictions. First one was gaming back in 2001 or 2002 whenever it was that World of Warcraft came out, the first massively multiplayer online game.
Uh-huh.
And I started playing that game with some people at work, and that became my life. And I have my wife and at that point 2 children at home, and I'm working 40 hours a week and then gaming 40 hours a week, and they get nothing. And I didn't, and this game became so important to me that I couldn't leave, because I was part of a team, and these team people were my best friends in the world, even though I'd never met them. And I actually did meet a couple of them. It was hilarious. I went on a business trip and mentioned I was in California at Hewlett Packard, and we were talking about this screen that they were coming out with. We were going to do some work with them on a card back then, and And I mentioned, wow, can you imagine World of Warcraft on that screen? And the guy goes, you play World of Warcraft? And it turns out that I knew that guy in game. We were actually part of the same guild and had done, spent hours together. And he's like, oh, and he like took me around and introduced me to like 10 other people in our guild. That was actually pretty fun, but the cost of that was very high.
Yeah.
My wife came to me and said, Dave, you're spending so much time on that game and you can't turn it off because you feel like you have to be there. You have a choice to make. You can continue to play the game or you can continue to be married to me. And I was like, oh, I choose you.
Yeah, right.
So I still love video games, but I only play games that I can pause now.
That's good. So really for you, your decision was that quick, right? And you just said, hey man, this is it.
In that one, yes.
Yeah.
In that one, yes. And I didn't have to go to treatment. I didn't have to get counseling. There was just dealing with just a choice. The one that has really been the one that was really difficult for me, the one that I had to learn how to love myself in spite of, was porn and sex addiction, specifically porn addiction. But
Yeah.
so I grew up in a household where mom would tear out, we'd had the Sears catalog, and mom would tear out the underwear sections because she didn't want to see anything, And when we went to Disneyland when I was growing up, we went on a trip up the California coast, and whenever we'd come to a beach, she'd make us hunker down in the van so that we couldn't see the women in bikinis. So to go from that to a mission where there was nudity everywhere, everywhere. You couldn't not see it when you went shopping. Like there was in the, at least I couldn't. Now this again could be a bias that my mind was like, this is so forbidden and super exciting, therefore that's all I could see. So a person who didn't have that context probably just wouldn't see it, but I did. And at one point when I got I had a companionship that was really, really tough, I started noticing that, like there was a dopamine rush when I would look at those things. And I went and talked to my mission president, and he just said, stop taking the sacrament for a while. And then he forgot about me. I'm like, how long do I need? He was like, oh, I'll let you know. And then he forgot about it. I called him back 3 months later. I'm like, and here I am. I'm a leader in the I'm leading this little congregation and I'm not taking the sacrament. And it's like, people are asking me, members are like, why are you not taking the sacrament? I'm like, I really can't tell you. That's not
right.
Nothing to share right now. Finally, I called him up and I'm like, hey, he's like, hello, Orton. So he was this amazing Ukrainian American guy. And he's like, hello, Orton, how you doing? I'm like, well, I'm pretty well. I was wondering if I could start taking the sacrament again. He's like, why'd you stop taking the sacrament? He completely forgot.
Oh man.
Yeah. So that was not particularly helpful, but the context I had was that I couldn't love myself and God couldn't love me if I was seeing things like that and being aroused from things like that. Like,
yeah.
Now the context I have is, thank goodness my systems are working. And if I see something that's, if I see nudity, it's not necessarily sexuality. And if I have a response, I'm so glad that my equipment's working in working order.
Yeah.
I love Penny and I love me and God loves me, but that took about 20 years to get to. That was a long haul. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot and I have a arc here, but do you want to, I'd love to make sure you're interjecting whenever you'd like to.
Yeah. No, I'm just here to, and I am, right. When I hear something that it reacts to me, yeah, definitely I'll jump in. And it's, I want to spin off of what you just said here, Dave. So there's a gentleman that I know here in Utah who runs a company, and I was out talking to him about the show, and they came in as a sponsor because they believed in what we were doing, and helped with some money to help us get some more equipment and some things like that, which it doesn't show right now because again, we're in a studio change.
Right.
And he battled sex and porn addiction, and he come from a very LDS family.
Mhm.
His started at age 13, and he battled it for 2 decades. And he was on a business trip. I think he said it was Boston, and he had just decided, I can't do this. And he knew of a bridge, and he was literally going. I mean, he drove his car there. He was going to jump off this bridge and commit suicide in another state away from his family.
Mhm.
And he said he remembers talking with God, and he got that voice in his head that said, "Why are you beating yourself up? Why are you not celebrating the days that you don't use?" Because that's how he used the terms, right?
Mhm.
And he stopped and he thought about it, and he went, that exact moment, I realized I wasn't celebrating the days that I didn't. I was only beating myself up for the days that I did. And
Mhm.
he went back to his hotel, got on the phone, called his wife, said, I need you to come out here. And he flew his wife out there. And he said they spent a day or two in the hotel room praying and talking and discussing things. And he said before he realized it, it was 3 days here, and then it was like 2 weeks, and then it was like 3 months, you know, and it's still not an easy road, right? We still have to go through our challenges because they're always going to be there for us no matter what.
Mhm.
And but yeah, he just started talking about celebrating those days. And Nick has also said on his show many times, and he was a guest on our show, both him and Ryan, and he talked about connecting the dots backwards. And when you connect the dots backwards of your life, you're going to realize you're exactly where you're at this very moment for a reason, right?
Yeah.
We've had to experience all that stuff. And it doesn't make us a bad person, right? It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with us or there's something going on in our head. All our journeys are different. And I've come to realize that even more doing this show is after about 3 months of doing the show, I'm like, gosh, are people still going to listen to this show? Because it's people talking about addiction, and they've heard this person talk about it, and this person talking this person about it. I finally come to realize it's not just about the addiction, it's about in each individual journey.
Mhm.
That's what makes it so flippin' special. And I believe everything that you went through, and again, you said our parents do the best that they can to protect us, right? No one handed them a parent manual on the proper way of being parents. No one handed me a manual. If there is one, why didn't I get one? Right? We do the best we can, and we're molds of our parents, and we take things of our parents, and then there's certain things we go, you know what? No, I don't agree with this. I'm going to do this. However, we still have that DNA in us. And yeah, we have to go through our experiences to get us to where we need to go, and to have the love of other individuals instead of that stigma, which is something I'm working on. I'm working on a talk about stigma of judging that book by its cover, because what's that? We was listening, my wife and I was listening to No Shoes Radio. It's a Kenny Chesney on Sirius XM, and the song that I think it's David Lee Murphy and him saying, little dust on the bottle. Don't let it fool you about what's inside. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to use that on a show.
That's so great. That's so great. Well, the other part of that is that for years in my addiction, the really important thing for me was to look like everything was together, like look like I was holding everything together.
Yeah.
And I wasn't fooling myself. I successfully fooled my wife for a while, but the experience of trying to appear one way and be another is very expensive, exhausting, actually. And it leads to, that road leads to more using. We'll use that term. I like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't lead to less using. And it's funny because it's not even the thing itself that does the damage to oneself, so far as I can tell. It's the hiding of it that does the real damage. So, and you know, and maybe it's the hiding is like, I'm trying to hide from myself. Like that guy that was considering killing himself, he didn't really want to end his life. He wanted to kill off that part of him that was addicted. He wanted to kill off that part of him. I'm so grateful that he had that conversation with God.
Right.
And got that message. You know, one of the first times that I really got some traction with my addiction was where a mentor of mine said, figure out how to be grateful for it, Dave. Figure out how to be grateful for it. I'm like, aha, I don't know what that even means. What is, how can I be grateful for this thing that makes me a liar, that is destroying my marriage, is affecting my children, God knows how, you know, and to be grateful for that. And the amazing thing, and you alluded to this, Al, you alluded to that the way that we come through is the way. The problems are the way. The addiction is the way that we come to making the contribution that we're here to make. And I have become extraordinarily grateful for the addiction, for the depression, for, you know, the suicidal ideation that I had, because I can relate to people now in a way that I was simply not able to before. And when I coach to a depth that I have walked through that valley of, you know, discomfort, that valley of stuckness. And so I don't know what they're going through, but boy, I know what's possible because of what I've gone through. So I'm extraordinarily grateful for it. And it's still there.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's what makes you so powerful, though, Dave. I mean, seriously, that's what makes all of us so powerful in our own little way, right? You know, there was someone on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we got talking about a little bit about spirituality on it. And one of the things I brought up too is that, you know, when Jesus started going out to start spreading the word, he picked the imperfect ones.
Mhm.
No one was perfect, right? He picked the imperfect ones to go out and help him spread the word. And to me, and I don't want to make it sound like, well, heck, God has chosen us, right? I'm just going to put it out bluntly. God has chosen us because we've had to go through what we went through to now get out there and help other individuals. Because my wife told me once, I went and picked her up. She was at a recovery center and she had a 24-hour stay where I could go pick her up. She could stay with me for 24 hours, and I had to have her back at the same time the next day. And she's telling me some stuff that was happening on at the recovery center. And of course, me being the uncertified therapist that I am, I'm going to give her some therapy, right? Counseling. And I started talking to her and saying, I was shoulding all over. You should do this. And next time, try doing this. And she finally stopped me and she goes, can I stop you just for a second? Just listen to what I have to say. And she goes, for once, and she used the F word this time, for effing once, I want you to be my husband instead of my damn therapist, because you have no clue what I'm going through.
Right.
That hurt. That really, really hurt. And it took me still a long time to figure out what she was meaning by that, right? So what you've gone through has given you that, I guess, that little bit of edge, because now you know what other people are suffering through, right? And that's what makes you good at what you do, because you've lived it. you've gone through it. You understand those feelings. You understand the negative stuff that the brain's telling us. And those who don't go through it,
Mhm.
even though I didn't look at myself as an addict because I only did it 2 days a week, I don't know how many times I told my wife, just stop it.
Mhm.
Just stop, right? Because it would be easy for me. I could have a drink and then just leave it and maybe not have another
Right.
drink for another month.
Right.
Not for my wife. That one drink's going to lead to 100 drinks,
Mhm.
right? So how do I know how to help her when I don't have a clue what she's going through?
Mhm.
So what you do now, and I kind of goes back to that first question I asked you at the beginning of the podcast about what got you into it, what got you into coaching. It started at an early age that you said after getting hit by the truck or the tractor, whatever it was, the
Yeah. But
accident that
yeah.
you went
Mhm.
through. And then your addictions, the gaming and the porn, to put you exactly right here where you're supposed to be right this very minute. Because now you have all that behind you. You have all that knowledge behind you to help another individual because you've lived it.
Thank you, Al. And you know, there's the presence that that brings, like being able to be with that. That's really something. You know, when we listen to people, we're not, I don't, when I listen to someone, I'm not listening for where I, unless I am, I'm not listening for where I'm better than them, or I'm not listening for where they're bad or wrong, or what have you. I'm listening for their greatness. And I'm listening for, not for perfection. You know, when it occurs to me that when God calls his people to him, so to speak, the chosen, it'll be, I call unto me my chosen, and I'm including all you sinners in there, and the people that pretend that they're not.
Yeah.
You know, it's a, and it's so funny to me that it's so funny to me that I still, like, Penny and I came down to Utah for a visit here last week to see some family and some friends that were in town. And I got road rage when I was living in Utah, like really bad. It was right around the time of the Olympics and all that road construction. And all y'all maybe go to church and worship together and be kind to each other, but on the roads you're all anonymous assholes. So you know, and that I went and did that until I moved to Idaho, where people are way more laid back as far as driving goes. And you know, there are people that go 15 miles an hour over the speed limit, but it's not everybody. And you're slower than, you're a danger if you don't, you know.
Yeah, right.
Um, we drove down and I lost my shit twice. You know, one time we were in a parking lot and this guy parked his truck, you know, had his ball like 2 inches or an inch and a half away from my bumper. He's probably using a camera, but it made, I like was really upset about this, you know, and I don't know exactly why, but he walked off and I spat on his truck and drove off. And Penny's like, who are you being right now?
Who is this guy?
You know, and we were driving along and there was driving home on the freeway, and I've driven that road hundreds of times now. And there was a guy who pulled over to pass some trucks, and he was in the left lane for like 3 minutes. Finally, you know, I noticed that I could get around him, so I zoomed around him and I flipped him off as I was passing. And then I immediately am like, okay, so now I'm blessing this guy. I'm desiring the very best things for him. You know, I flipped him off and I love me and I love him. Okay, what? How does that work? I don't know how to explain it, But I can tell you that it used to upset me when I get road ragey. It would upset me for like days. I'd be upset and on edge for days. Now it's like a couple of seconds. And then if I pull over and I see them, I'm like, hey, I'm so sorry. I lost my temper back there. I flipped you off and I apologize. How you doing? Is everything okay for you?
Yeah, right. It'd probably be like, who the heck is this guy?
It's like, what are you
Oh,
talking about? You know? So that stuff happens. Like I am not, I have not yet attained the level of perfection that I hope is my end, you know? And I love me exactly as I am and exactly as I am not.
yeah.
Anyway, I just want to share that.
No, and I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did, because again, we have to love ourselves. We really, really do. You know, my wife, she now talks about it because now she's a certified peer support specialist. So now she's out helping others in their journey, right?
Mhm.
And one of her biggest things is she always felt worthless. Always. Did
Yeah.
you know it didn't matter. I mean, I always knew when she was getting ready to fall back into her addiction after not drinking for a week or two or a month, whatever it was, because she would start criticizing other people. You know, if
Mm,
they looked at her, she'd be like, the hell are you looking at?
yeah.
You know, and it's because she's judging herself. She's thinking they're judging me, right? So that's why she's making that comment. And I would be like, oh, well, she'll be drunk within the next 24 hours. And she pretty much was.
Yeah.
You know, and now she loves who she is as an individual.
Mhm.
And to see this woman break out of her shell, you know, a lot of, I told her one day, she got all teary eyed one day, and I said, you know, well, she heard me talk about it on one of the shows. And I said, you know, my wife was this caterpillar for years, and pretty much her whole life, just crawling around and not ever making anything of her life that she felt was worth living for, right?
Mhm.
She went through this addiction, 8 long years of this addiction. At least I know 4 times I thought she was dead. I literally thought I was going to lose my wife because the alcohol had her so bad.
Yeah.
And to see that she has now spun this cocoon and come out as this flippin' butterfly, just to see that transformation. And that's what it is for me. That's what it is for her, right?
Mhm.
She's been this way for so long, her whole life. And now all of a sudden, she's something totally different. It's not a caterpillar anymore. And I've shared on the show a couple times when she was just starting her recovery. She has told me some things and that I've heard before, right? And I'm going, thinking in my head, yeah, I've heard this. I don't know how many flipping times for the past 8 years. This is all just BS. She's blowing smoke up my rear end, you know. And then one day we're at the store and I'm holding some stuff and we're in line and I hear her talking and I'm like, are you talking to me? And I turn around and look and she's talking with someone else. And I'm like, oh, wait, this is different. Maybe she's right.
Mhm.
Maybe there is a change already starting to happen. And that was really basically the start of her coming out of that cocoon, right? I was seeing a whole new individual because she didn't have that lack of self anymore.
Mhm.
And you probably see that with some of your clients, right? I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
And I see that just in life. I've even seen it within myself. You know, I told you at the beginning of the show that I've been working on myself for the past 14 years, and I will continue to do so until the day God calls me home. Because I'm a firm believer there's no finish line,
I agree with that.
you know,
Totally agree
and
with that.
we all need to continue to be better and break out of our shell. Because once we feel like we're comfortable, that's when bad things are going to start happening. That it's just that's how I see it.
Got it. You know, the one of the things that I love the 12-step programs. One of the things that I love about them is that they indirectly slowly, and if you stay in those, inescapably expose you to what love is, remind you that you are worthy of love, and help you to become one who is loving through the actions of the steps. So there's this scale of consciousness that was made famous by a book called Power versus Force, written by Dr.
Yeah,
David.
I've read that one too. Yep.
Fantastic.
Dr. Hawkins, is that who it
Yeah,
is? Dr. Hawkins
Dr.
who wrote that
Dr.
one.
David Hawkins. If you read that one, he's written some other books, some of them which have been published since his death, but there's one that is just fantastic called Letting Go. Oh, oh my word. Wow. Good stuff. But
Hmm.
on that scale of consciousness, 0 is dead. 20 is shame, or apathy, and then you go to shame and guilt, and then you get to anger, and there starts to be some power. And then above anger is pride, and then you get to truth, which is at level 200. So between 0 and 200, that is the realm of addiction. That is the realm of I don't love myself. And here's the thing. So far as I can tell, we can't love God or anybody any more than we love ourselves. And anybody's welcome to disagree with me, but the experience of and the depth of love that we have for anybody else is constrained by the love we have for ourselves. So anyway, you continue up that and you go from 200 to 500. Those are positive, upward spiraling, experiences. At 500, you get to love. And at 550, you get to unconditional love. Loving for no reason. Loving because you choose to. Loving because that's who you are. And the 12-step program tests out at, it calibrates at 550. It calibrates at this is a place where a lot of people that I've known that have gone through the 12 steps, they come out of that loving themselves and loving others. Your wife is a peer coach. That is an expression of her lovingness towards other people. You don't do that without that love.
Right.
Simply not available. So that is really powerful to me. So I thank you for letting me go on that little soliloquy rant, if you will.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's what this show's about, right? Is we want our guests to come on and just say whatever it is that comes into mind. That's, to me, it's important. And we've had a few people say it needs to be more structured, to be more of a professional type podcast. However, they could be right. However, the comments that we get from people, especially our guests, going, man, I love just how open it is and how comfortable it is for them, knowing that they're not going to be judged. They could say whatever it is that they want to say and put out whatever they want to put out, because we're not here to judge anyone. We want others to hear their voices, right? It is so powerful to hear what other people have gone through, because I really do think nowadays, especially with everything that's going on in the world, and guys, if you watch the news, that's your choice, but I do highly recommend not to, because it just puts you in a negative stance or negative mindset. And you said it quite a few times here, Dave, is it's stuff we can't control. And if we're feeding into it, we're feeding into the fear, which is actually making it stronger. We've got to stay the heck away from it. But yeah, I love guests like yourself. You just come on and don't apologize, because that's what this is about. Just say whatever comes out, because and this might be the first time all our listeners have heard this, but I usually say a prayer on show dates. And I just ask God to please direct me and direct our guests in the matter that it needs to go, right? Please let them share the message that needs to be shared. And in 160 plus shows, I've not been steered wrong, and I don't think our guests have ever been steered wrong. It comes out at whatever the message is that message that's supposed to be heard that day.
Wonderful. It's wonderful, Al. And I, I so appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. That love, it can be expressed in so many different ways. And we can only hear what we can hear. We can only experience what we experience, right? So that somebody who's in the thralls of addiction, somebody who is in the middle of the spin up of self-hatred that comes from using, if you will, the lack of self-respect, the lack of confidence, the inertia, this concentration on self instead of being able to connect with anybody else, all those things, somebody could come up to them and say, I love you. And they will only be able to hear the part that filters through what's available to them in that addiction as they're in the middle of it. And this self-forgiveness, which is such a strange thing. I'm not talking about forgiveness of sins. It's not my domain. It's not our domain. But the self-forgiveness definitely is our domain. And there's this idea of when I discover that I am worthy of loving myself, and that I'm doing the best I can. I extend the grace of our parents did the very best they could. And I extend that to us. We're doing the very best we can, given the circumstances that we're in and the resources we have available to us. Now, we can't see all the resources because of the circumstances and exactly where we are. And a person in addiction can see very few resources, generally speaking, But when we start to discover this possibility of self-forgiveness, compassionate, loving self-forgiveness, and feeling the feelings that we have not been willing to feel, a new world opens up. And it becomes, I am not an addict, I have an addiction, or maybe I am an addict and I am a child of God. I'm unattached to which way you look at that, but the beauty of it is the possibility of an and it's not an either or. It's like I choose to follow my faith as best I can, and I have an addiction, pornography and sex. And I tell the truth about it to my wife and my leaders and myself,
right?
And it just becomes this life-giving experience to feel all the feelings and then let them go, and so I'd like to show you what this looks like, if I may.
Yes, please.
I'm doing an event down in Mesa, Arizona, next Friday. And I have, less people signed up than I would like to. And if I start to let myself feel bad about that, or to concentrate on that, it's like watching the news, right? It's designed to make me feel bad about myself and the direction that the world is going.
Right.
And that can change the actions that are available, or even the way that I show up or who I am being when I'm talking with people about the possibility of coming and attending. And to forgive myself. So that's definitely clearly outside of the domain. It's not a crime. It's not anything other than a judgment that I have against myself that it shouldn't be this way. Like it should be full already, right? So I would start off with this. I forgive myself for judging myself that my event should be full and completely paid for, and I should have that money in my bank account already. And here's a crucial point that sometimes gets missed out. I take a moment now and I feel that judgment. I feel the weight of it, the texture of it, the breadth of it. I feel the depth of it. This one's not very deep, by the way. But I feel it all the way through. And having felt it all the way through, it dissipates like a cloud. And then I can create this new truth. And this is how it sounds. And the new truth is that I am giving and I am receiving, that I am inspired and act immediately on the nudge, that I am blessed, assisted, and supported by allies, angels, and friends, and we are the shepherd and the flock. That I am, that God, the universe, and the world have my back, and everything works out for me. And I can use words from my document, my declarations of who I am, or I can create whatever it is in the moment. And that rejoins me, reconnects me with the part of me that is divine. That reconnects me with my power, reconnects me with the strength and the depth that I have, having come through what I've come through. Whereas if I'm dealing with judgments about myself, then they're not, And so what this might look like for an addict, which I still have addiction, I still have draws to things, is I forgive myself for judging myself as evil and wrong and a liar because I looked at porn last night.
Yeah.
And I stop and I pause and I feel all the feelings that are associated with this acting out or this using. And the new truth is, having felt that all the way through, and I can't tell you when that is. A person has to feel that for themselves. When it begins to dissipate, then I can create. And the new truth is that I am exactly where I need to be, that no one is worthy of my condemnation and everyone's worthy of my love, including me. And I acted out and I love me. I acted out and God loves me. I acted out and I love people. And that's, and I have my own processes for when I act out. Like I have an agreement with Penny to tell her about it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen all that often, but it happens. And I have, it's so weird to think, coming to the show, the other side of addiction sounds like you would only talk with people who have been clean for 24 months and, have.
It's both. It's both
Yeah.
sides, right?
Yeah.
And it's also getting to the other side of the addiction. It's that journey.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
And I
what
don't
makes
occur
the
to
title
myself
so
as,
cool.
that's a beautiful title. It's wonderful. And I don't occur to myself as somebody who is hopelessly addicted. And I take responsibility for when I do things that are not in alignment with my agreements.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well, you're accepting it. And Dave, thank you for sharing that, because you had me freaking glued to every word that you were saying. That is so, so powerful what you just shared. I mean, extremely powerful. To, like you said, to taste it, to smell it, to feel it. This is just my beliefs. God gave us all these emotions for a reason. He gave us the happiness, the sadness, the frustration, the anger, the despair, the trauma. I mean, depression. We are supposed to feel these emotions. The damage is when we don't allow ourselves to feel it. You just said, I allowed myself to go through this and feel what I needed to feel, right? It's okay. Society has molded us so flippin' well that we are not allowed to feel emotions. My heck, they've even got us afraid of pain, right? We're not supposed to feel pain. Here, take this pill that'll give you 15 side effects, but you won't feel any more pain, right? Now, yes, there are things out there that are to help us, right? There is, and I'm not knocking it all. However, we are allowed to feel these. Are the trick of it, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong. Don't stay stuck in it. Don't get stagnant. Feel the emotions like you just shared, but then you moved on. You didn't keep yourself here. You took however much time it took you to go through whatever you needed to go through and went, okay, I'm done. Let's
Mhm.
go. Time to move on, right? There's
Well,
nothing wrong with that.
exactly. Well, and that is the path, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah,
not only is there nothing wrong with that, but to your point, we're not here to just have I mean, we are here for joy, and that joy comes through seeing through the contrast of not joy. I
yeah,
mean, you don't know what it is until you experience the absence of joy. You can't know joy.
yeah. Amen.
Um, there's this thing. So I love this book called Dune. There's a good, very well made movie that came out a couple of years ago, but also there was a 1984 version of the movie that I really enjoy too. But this book, there's a part of this that I wanted to share. This where I first encountered this feeling and letting go, this addressing and not hiding from my feelings. And shoot, I'm not sure exactly where it's at here. Hmm. Hmm. Well, apparently I'm not supposed to tell you that one. I'm
Oh,
supposed to tell you this one.
all right.
Think you of the fact that a deaf person cannot hear. Then what deafness may we not all possess? What senses do we lack that we cannot see and cannot hear another world around us? What is there around us that we cannot see?
Hmm.
So this is dealing much more with the feeling and the experience of what we don't know that we don't know. And that opens up an entire world too.
Oh my gosh,
Like,
yeah.
and it deals with addiction, it deals with every part of life. Like you don't, as much as I think that other people see the world the way I do, they don't. And nobody ever will, because they haven't seen the same things I have and they haven't interpreted those things the same way I have. So I grew up thinking that my brothers were having exactly the same experience that I did, and they didn't. They had their own experiences, some very painful, some very not painful, some very joyful. My wife and I were both like sixth generation or fifth generation Mormons. And you would think that based on that, we'd have an enormous amount in common. And we do. We have a whole lot of the worldview that is very similar. And then, I grew up in a household where Western medicine was the only acceptable thing, and her mother's a naturopath. So
Yeah. Blew the doors wide open.
that's right. That's right. Um, but there's this thing where we can only sense what we don't know by really getting curious, by really being curious about the other person's experience. And I I acknowledge you, Al, because I sense that you are one who can hear, that listens people powerfully, not only listening for their greatness, but listening for where they may be experiencing pain that they hide. And by listening for that, you're able to see people in a way that makes a difference. And in a way that, I don't know, Al, you can tell me if I'm wrong here. There are people that when you talk with them, they start crying and they don't know why they're crying.
Yeah. Yeah. That's even happened to me.
Mm-hmm. No, that's happened to you, but also you have been the one listening. So you've
Yeah.
been the crier and the listener at different times, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Me
absolutely.
too. Me
Yeah.
too.
And again, it's okay, right? I went to a men's group quite a few years ago, and it's the first time my whole life where I've been in a room with 20, 25 other men, where we broke off in groups of 5 to talk about a subject that came up. We're all talking about the same subject, but we're talking about how that subject affects us, right? What it means to us. I've never been in a room and seen so many men crying in my life, right?
Mhm.
That opened my eyes big time, because I was brought up, you don't cry, because if you do, I will give you something to cry about. Well, that
Right.
doesn't make sense. You don't want me to cry, but yet you're going to give me something to cry about? I already got something to cry about, right?
That's a
Why do you need
beautiful
to give it to me?
paradox.
I already have it. That's why I'm crying. I
Yeah.
never could understand that statement. Anyway, it was so cool to see. And these guys came from all different backgrounds, all different backgrounds. Some were, yeah, I mean, it's private, so I won't say it. It just amazed, it just amazed me, right? It really opened my eyes and a lot of things. And I'm just so grateful I got to be a part of it and experience it. And yeah.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
this has been some powerful stuff. I could probably sit and talk to you for another flipping hour, Dave, easy, because I
Easily.
feel like I've connected with you already. I mean, within the first 5 minutes, I already felt that connection, which is really cool. And that's what I love about doing this show, is to meet amazing individuals like yourself that are out there to make a difference. And however, you're also out there being vulnerable yourself, right? You're not holding back the trials and tribulations that you went through. You're sharing those, and it's important, right? I just went through something here in January, and I'll hurry and wrap this up so I can let you get on with your day. When I started this show, it was all about my wife's alcoholism and what it was like for me being on the other side of addiction, because I didn't understand it, right? Most of us don't understand it. If you're not in it, you don't understand it. And don't pretend that you do, because I will call bullshit on you. You don't.
Testify, brother.
It's that justified. Yeah. I had a good friend here in Salt Lake City. His name's Dave DeRocher. He's the executive director for the Other Side Academy, downtown Salt Lake. They are doing amazing things, helping hundreds and hundreds of individuals. I had a meeting with him, and he's the one that basically told me, Al, start sharing your story. Stop sharing your wife's.
Mhm.
I just happened to share it that same day on my show because our guest didn't show up.
Mhm.
My guest co-host was his assistant. So she became the host. I became the guest on my show.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I told my story. And I really started thinking about it after I told my story. And this was this past January. I've been doing this show all this time, and I've asked our guests to come in and be vulnerable and open up. And really, I haven't really needed to ask them. They've just done it, right? So I don't want to put it that way, like I'm the one that drew it out. They already had it. They just did it. And here I wasn't being honest myself. I would tell little tidbits of it. I was protecting myself, protecting of what I was afraid family members were going to think of me. Still, when I shared that, it took such a huge weight off of me. And then a miracle happened. To me, I call it a miracle. It was something just flipping amazing. I'm at work one day and my oldest daughter calls me. And she says, "Hey, Dad, what's going on?" I says, "Well, I'm here at work." And she says, "I need to talk to you." I'm like, "All right." And she goes, "And you're not going to like the first part of it." I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, okay, where's this going to go?" And she goes, "Dad, when you started your podcast, I wanted to do everything I could to support you." She goes, "But as time went, I found I wanted to support your podcast, but I didn't want to support you anymore." And I'm thinking, what? I don't understand. Why would my daughter not want to support me? She goes, "As your shows went on, Dad, all you talked about is playing the victim." And she goes, "And you were the victim, right? You went through a lot of stuff." She says, but I know your past. And she goes, I happened to be making dinner the other day and clicked on a podcast and listened to it. And she goes, and I listened to it again. And she goes, I called to tell you how proud I am of you because you shared your story for the very first time. When you have your own child who you tell all their life how proud you are of them, to tell you as the parent, my heavens, that flipping opened up so much. And I just recently spoke at the Healing Utah Success Summit. It's an event that my friend Mallory and I put on. And when I got done doing my talk, my wife came up to me and gave me the biggest hug. She goes, babe, that is the most powerful freaking talk I've heard you say yet to this day. And I really do believe it's because of how that this past January, how I finally started opening up and allowing things just to go right. And my mom was at that event, and my mom heard me share my story of my cocaine and alcohol addiction for the very first time.
Mm.
And it's huge. It takes so much weight off of us. So for those who listen to this show, what you've heard Dave talk about, what you've heard our other guests talk about, and I'm not knocking those who don't, because I've had some people say, thank you for inviting me. It just brings back too many memories that I just don't want to bring up again. I understand. That's your journey. That's what works for you. I will support that 100%. However, there are those who do want to talk about it and they don't know how. Just do it. Just do it. Even if you have to start out just a little teeny bit of it, because it lifts such a huge weight off your shoulders. You will realize that you can actually start life shortly after that, right? Life actually starts happening to you. Let me see. Life isn't happening to you. Life is happening for you. So it's happening for you more often than you realize.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful.
So,
Yeah. And if you cannot muster the courage to share it publicly, share it privately. Find somebody
exactly.
that you trust and share it. Go to a 12-step meeting and share it in anonymity,
Yeah.
you know, and relieve your burden. You don't have to carry that around. Everybody, including you, is doing the very best damn job they can at this thing called life.
Yeah. Right. Amen. Well, Dave, there's a couple things I want to say. So, you talked about in the bio being grateful for addiction is a possibility, and also there is nothing that they could do to separate themselves from the divine love. That very first thing that I just shared, I was at an AA meeting with my wife, and a guy got up to get his 10-15 year chip, and the first thing he says is, I hit my knees every day and thank God for making me an alcoholic. And when I heard that, I leaned over to my wife and I said, that guy is effing nuts. Why would he say that, right? I get it now. I understand it. It changes your life, and it does open up a lot of other possibilities. Is there anything you want to kind of elaborate off of that one here as we come to an end?
Yeah. That the depth of pain as a possibility, the depth of pain that a person goes through as they go through addiction and come out of it, or become willing to share what's going on as they're dealing with it. The depth of pain is deep, so dark. And the joy and the light is just as high and just as bright and just as joy-filled as the abyss of addiction. And your path is never going to be all of one or all of the other. And I'm speaking about myself. I don't want to speak about others. My path has been not all of one and all of the other. And the beauty of it is that I can see from both points of view. I can see that more than one thing can be true at the same time based on different people's perspectives, their interpretations, their point of view, their experience, their current physical state. And that I have great compassion for and love for those who discover, like you have, like I have, that the addiction is the way through to becoming the being that makes a difference, the being that leads a fulfilling life, that we are intended to be here.
Yeah. And you're talking the being with the capital B and E, right?
That, sure. Yeah.
That,
Yeah. Go ahead.
no, that I'm just saying that was powerful. I mean, that was very powerful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that.
My pleasure.
And you've talked about a couple times during the show. And again, listeners, please know, if you're a spiritual person, man, God's not judging us for our mistakes, right? I mean, I had a friend tell me once when I told him I think God's angry at me. He says, God doesn't get angry at you. He loves you, right? We've gone through what we've gone through until we learn our lesson or until we understand it. And then we can move on, and we use that as our strength. I think I've heard Nick say on some of the shows many times before is our downfalls aren't downfalls. They are our strengths. They're the strengths that we're being given to help us move on into the next chapter of our life. And it's going to continue. There's going to be one chapter after another. And it's that journey that we got to go through to start understanding. And we may not understand it. And that's why he says connect the dots backwards, because when you do, then you'll understand it. You'll get it.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. Thanks, Al.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else, Dave, that you would like to share before? I mean, we've almost gone in an hour and a half already. It flows by so fast, and I'm glad you didn't have a time frame. That's why I asked beforehand, because sometimes these things just go so well that you just keep going.
Well, I do have a request. May I acknowledge you, Al?
Please, yeah, I'll take a request. Yeah.
Well, to me, who you are is fulfilling your divine mission of being a healer, of being one who heals not from actions per se, but from the way that you listen to people and from the possibilities that you see, for people and in people. To me, who you're being is a loving husband. And that's an amazing thing. And it doesn't mean you're always that, but you are that. Who you're being is the difference of healing. Who you're being is the difference of connection. Who you are in this world is one who allows others to have their point of view and embraces them regardless of whether it's your point of view or not. You are divine love. Walking around in a meat suit, talking with the people you talk with, speaking the words you speak, and the world is richer for your being here in a way that is pretty undescribable in words. So thank you. I love you for who you are. I love you anyway, too.
Yeah.
But I love what you're up to. And thank you for allowing me to express that at the end of this interview where I've gotten to get to know you deeper than even after our connection call. Thank you. Thank you for who you are.
Absolutely. And thank you. Thank you, Dave, so much for your kind words and your love. And um, yeah, get me emotional. That says a lot, and it means a lot to me, because that's the whole purpose of really doing this show, right? It's therapeutic for me, right? It's guests like yourself who are also helping me heal in my journey with whatever I've got going on in my life. And there's some things that you shared today that I wrote down, that I wrote them down for a reason, because it's things that I need to look at a little closer in my life. So thank you for what you do. And thank you for, I mean, I thank God for the journey that you've been on, even though I've only known just a short portion of your journey, because it's made you who you are today. And you helped me in a lot of different ways today, probably without you even knowing it. And you made an impact in my life, and you touched my heart. And for that, I thank you for your time and wanting to spend an hour and a half with me on a call and in an interview. And hopefully with this show, we've touched a life, or maybe two, and we've helped somebody open their eyes a little bit more. And doesn't matter, yeah, it doesn't matter what they're, well, I guess it doesn't matter what they're going through, but hopefully with the steps or the things that we've shared, that it gives them another stone to step on forward, not backwards. Even if
Yeah.
it's an inch forward, you're still moving forward. Don't go an inch back. Just continue to go forward with those baby steps, right? Just like us as babies learning how to walk, right? If we gave up the first time we stood up and fell, we'd all be still crawling.
That's right. That's right. Oh,
Yeah.
love it.
Dave, if anybody is interested in talking to you or reaching out to you, or to possibly hire you to come in and do any coaching, how would they find you?
Best way to find me is my website, daveortoncoaching.com.
Okay.
And yeah, my phone number's out there that you can set up a time to talk with me. I've got a calendar that you can choose a time that works for you. I do connection calls all the time, and I call them connection calls because that's what we expect, to call them. But
Yeah.
they're truly an opportunity for people to experience. I mean, I'm all in on every call. This moment is the most important moment of my life right now, because this is the moment that I'm in. And when I'm on a connection call with you, we'll go into whatever you want to. And that's what I love. And if we're a match, great. And if we're not, that's fine too.
Right. Okay. Connection call. I want to make sure, because all our guests, whether they have written a book or do coaching or whatever it is that they do, I always like to give them that opportunity to share
Thank you
what
so
they
much.
have going on, and also to make sure that I get it posted when the show comes out, so people know how to contact you. And yeah, my gosh. Well, thank you again, Dave, so much for everything that you're doing. And I'm so grateful that I had an opportunity to watch the show that you did with Nick and Ryan. And thank you for reaching out to me so quickly. When I reached out to you, you responded in a very quick manner, and we had our opportunity to chat a little bit and learn a little bit about one another. And yeah, just thank you for your time, and thank you for being.
My
Appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank you I fully accept that. It's been wonderful. And I hope, I don't hope, I experience that you recognize how much this has meant for me as well, because it's an opportunity, just like for you. My healing continues as I help others, and as we talk through the things that are there. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listeners, thank you for all your support, all our many sponsors. Thank you. Resilience Talk Network, thank you so much. All our guest co-hosts that come on the show, guys. We couldn't do any of this without you. And thank you to the man upstairs. Thank you, God, for putting me on this path to meet all these amazing individuals that I have this opportunity to meet, some in person, some not quite yet, but however, I do know somewhere down the road we will meet, because
Yep.
that possibility is always there. We're going to end you with this, as we do at the end of every show, guys. Remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.